from the sky. And we have a very special show tonight. Uh, Alan Steinfeld, author of Making Contact, will be our guest for much of the show. The book that he wrote is Making Contact, Preparing for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence. And we're going to dive pretty deep into that. I'll tell you more about Alan right before I bring him on. But let me tell you about what's going on in the heavens. Most of you are really excited that Mercury is finally going back direct on Sunday. Let me also say that this is the day when Mercury changes directions, retrograde to direct, because it's going to go direct like very early in the morning tomorrow. And this is a time that Mercury can play tricks on us. Last show I had, it really played tricks. My microphone was not working. So you never know with Mercury retrograde, but it feels like today is going to be pretty clear and pretty good with Mercury. So let me take you back to the year 2000 in November at the election. Mercury was going from retrograde to direct, just like it is now. And that night, if you remember, the anchors on the TV, news anchors, were going back and forth between Gore won, Bush won, Gore won, Bush won, back and forth all night and overnight. That's what can happen when Mercury's changing directions. And that was a crazy time, wasn't it? So this time with Mercury retrograde, the people I've talked to, clients, friends, tell me, and my own experience is really difficult the last 3 weeks for people in many ways, partly with communication devices, technology, but also just other ways. People just having a really, really difficult time. When Mercury's retrograde, Mercury rules our brain and communication. That's where a lot of the problems are. But, the purpose of Mercury retrograde is not to give problems. The purpose of Mercury retrograde is to get people to think differently, to change their mind, to look at things that they've already decided and then say to themselves or question what they've already decided and go through a process to make sure that what they've decided is right for them going forward. That's why I always advise people to not make major decisions during Mercury retrograde for that reason, because you can have your life going in a certain direction and you're thinking a certain way. During Mercury retrograde, it starts shifting, you question. But if you jump at that point in time, it might not be good overall. So best to just relax, let Mercury go back direct, and all's fine. Another way to look at Mercury retrograde is Mercury has a lot to do with our left brain way of thinking. Linear thought. When Mercury goes retrograde, the best thing to do with it is to let go of that analytical part of the brain and open up to your other side of the brain, your right brain. Because from that side, you'll get attuned in a way that's natural for the Mercury retrograde, and it'll help you overall to connect with your right brain. We bring Alan on. He's got a lot to say about that too. I took a class with Alan on contacting out there, ET. And the way that we were able to do it was by getting out of our left brain, opening up our right brain, which of course he helped us all to do. And that way we could enter the other dimensions and make the contact. So now, with Mercury changing directions from retrograde to direct, some people will go through the left brain starting to come back, more linear thought again, and then you got to make that balance between your left and right brain now, especially now as it changes directions. And when it goes back direct, that doesn't mean, oh, well, now it's time to get back to analytical linear thought. It's time to take what you've experienced during the retrograde period and bring it forward into your mind and your consciousness. Another thing that happens during Mercury retrograde is we go over the past. The past comes back to us. The past can come back to us with through our dreams, and people that come to us in those dreams. And it can also be waking thoughts, a lot of people and events from the past. So the reason for that is, again, to help us to look at our life now based on or contributed by what's happened to us in the past. So we could be in a really difficult relationship now and with patterns that are similar to patterns that we've had in the past. And so when a retrograde happens and people come back to us through the dreams, through waking memories, we're able to look at those old patterns again and work on the relationship that we're in now so that we can transform those patterns. So Mercury direct at the exact time will be 2:07 a.m. Pacific time. And not good to make the big decisions yet. Remember, changing directions. So I'd say, give it about, from my experience, give it about a week. And then after that week, things will be perfectly clear. Again, it's for left brain. If you're working a lot in your right brain, you don't have to worry about it as much. So Mercury goes direct tomorrow, then Pluto goes direct on the 8th of October. And then there's a really strong full moon on the 9th of October. Saturn goes direct on the 22nd of October. And then the big stuff happens. On the 25th of October, there's a solar eclipse in Scorpio. And on the 8th of November, which is election day, and that makes things complicated for elections, again, lunar eclipse, full moon in Libra, Aries, meaning sun in Libra, moon in Aries. Because remember, all full moons are sun and moon opposite each other. All new moons are sun and moon conjunct. So that lunar eclipse full moon will have the sun in Libra and the moon in Aries. The solar eclipse on the 25th of October will be sun and moon both in Scorpio. So you all know that a lot of what this show has been and will continue to be is about the changing of consciousness to move into the consciousness of the Age of Aquarius. And in general, I've spoken before, but the Age of Aquarius is a time of equality, diversity within unity, self-determination for people and for countries, entities of any sort. And that means that a lot you see in the world with the economy, the war in Ukraine, China threatening Taiwan, all of those things that get people all nervous, it's all part of a bigger picture of moving us into this Age of Aquarius. Remember, diversity within unity. That means each entity true to itself, and from that place making unity. The place that people think unity is made from is everybody's the same, wearing the same uniform, thinking the same way. That's not the kind of unity we're talking about that we're moving into. It's people that are different than one another, countries that are different from one another, honored for their difference, honored for their authenticity, and at the same time, moving into unity, oneness with the differences. I don't think this has been done in the world before, but it's going to be done as we get further and further into the Age of Aquarius, which, I believe actually began winter solstice 2020. So more and more, we're going to be moving into that consciousness. So as you look out into the world, know that part of what's going on with some of the conflicts, as ugly as they are, is to even out the power structure in the world. And the economy going through its troubles is for us to transform that world economy. Remember, a lot of the world has been governed by the military-industrial complex. That means military and economy. And for us to truly go through the consciousness that we need to move into this new world, it's my belief that we need to go through some of these things that are happening in the world in order to make more equality in both the economic situation and the power structure of the world. So each one of us is going through our own individual consciousness transformation. And that's not easy all the time. It can be really difficult. There can be dark nights of the soul that are part of the transformation, especially when the planet Pluto is making a transit to a planet in your natal chart. And the two other transformational planets are Neptune and Uranus. Before 1781, the furthest planet recognized, meaning furthest out, was Saturn. And Saturn then was like the energy that was most respected. It's the Old Testament. It's the patriarchal world. There are certain rules that you must follow or you'll be punished. Then in 1781, Uranus was discovered. At the same time, the American and French Revolution were going on. As above, so below. Uranus is about moving beyond kings and queens, dictators and governments that tell people what to do. Uranus is the ruling planet of Aquarius. And as such, it's about of the people, by the people, and for the people, which is very Aquarian and very Aquarian age. So it's actually moving into the new world. The cusp of it began back in 1781 when those revolutions were happening. And then in 1846, Neptune was discovered. And in 1930, Pluto was discovered. So each time, humanity was integrating places in consciousness that were needed to move into the new world beyond the Saturn control of consciousness. And so in 1965-66, this is important because when those outer planets make conjunction with each other, it means a furthering of the consciousness transformation. Uranus-Pluto made conjunction in 65-66. That is when the 60s revolution began. The next connection and conjunction between two outer planets was Uranus conjunct Neptune in 1993. The switch then was internet and computers, which have a lot to do with Aquarian and the Aquarian age. And now here we are, open up into the age of Aquarius. The world is going through the big changes that are out there. They're not going to go away. But remember, in your individual life, it's not about the troubles. It's about the light that shines through the troubles, that brings you into the new consciousness, that helps you to see synchronicities, signs and symbols from the universe, and helps you know that the bigger picture of the universe is bringing you to where you need to be to transform your consciousness as a soul in this universe. Speaking of the universe, we're going to bring on Alan Steinfeld. And by the way, his website is newrealities.com. And just a little bit about him. Let me explain to you, tell you about Alan. 2006, produced a water forum and brought Dr. Emoto, I know a lot of you know that name, to New York along with Hopi elders. On 10-10-10, he produced Crystal Skull Gathering with Mayan elders. He's on the board of Friends of Noetic Sciences. He's the VP, Vice President of Association of Psychotherapy and Spirituality. He's a representative to the UN for the Academy of Future Science. And this I certainly did not know. He's a licensed acupuncturist with a master's degree in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. Alan overall is a writer, producer, and speaker in the fields of human potential, metaphysics, conscious evolution, healing, creativity, spiritual awakening, and cosmic intelligences. And that's the part that we want to talk about tonight is the cosmic intelligences. And I really enjoyed and grew a lot through the class I took with Alan. Um, and I'll be giving a class like that myself coming up mid-October. But let's, without further ado, as they say, let's bring on Alan. Alan, hi.
Hello. Can you hear me okay, Leo?
Yes, can you hear me okay too?
Yes, the biggest part that I didn't put on my resume is that I'm an Aquarian. And not only that, I have my son. My son is 1 degree Aquarius in the 11th house in opposition to Uranus. It's in direct opposition to
Oh,
Uranus and Leo. So that kind of polarity between the Sun Uranus and Leo Aquarius, I think reinforces the Aquarian energy, don't you think?
oh my God, Alan. Yes, indeed.
And I have Mercury and Chiron also in a kind of stellium there in that 11th house near the Sun as
My
well.
God, that's wonderful. You are a representative of that new Aquarian age. Definitely.
Okay,
I didn't
great.
even know that. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing
It
that too.
is. I really identify with the Aquarian values, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Aquarian is the mind. It's those mind waves, and that's what we did in our class was pick up on those levels of consciousness, which are pure thought, pure mental realities in a sense. So,
How's this Mercury retrograde been for you these last 3 weeks?
um, it's made it harder for me to focus on what I really need to focus on. I've
Yeah.
really had to struggle because Mercury and my Sun are very much in conjunction. When it's not aligned, when it's the energy's going backwards, the focus of what I'm here to do is it's not as sharp as it could be. So I do feel the change now. Like right about an hour ago, I started to feel like the fog was lifting. I mean, is that
Yes.
is that normal?
Yeah, that's perfectly normal. I've been feeling that too today. Fog
What?
lifting and
Yeah, no,
feeling
thank you
better.
for asking that because I didn't put it together. I said, why can't I be more focused? Why am I so distracted? And what you said about Mercury, because I'm very mercurial. I mean, Hermes is a major archetype for me.
Hmm.
And and
Tell, tell,
so
tell me
the
tell me
Hermetic
more about that.
tradition, what's
Tell,
that?
tell me tell me more about Hermes as being an
Well,
archetype.
the Hermetic tradition, who
Yes.
Hermes was. Hermes
Mhm.
Trismegistus was the kind of purveyor of sacred knowledge. And so just everything Hermes stands for as an archetypal figure is something I identify with. Not the Zeus Jupiter, not the Apollo Dionysian. It's the Hermetic ways, the everything that Hermes stands for, travel and commerce and sacred knowledge and what else does Hermes stand for? The kind of figuring out the mechanics of the universe. I think that's really the essence of Hermetic philosophy and of course alchemy and all that.
And
So
consciousness.
and consciousness. Yeah, Hermes I would say is the archetype or God or essence of consciousness.
Yes,
So
I
and
agree.
yeah, I have a whole philosophy of archetypes anyway that we can get into now or
I,
later.
oh my God, we got so much. I'm sure we're not
We
going to get it
do.
all in today.
I know. But I'm glad you were in the class because you were a bright light and you were really excellent and so open. So thank you, Leo. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It was definitely my pleasure. Let's
Right.
let let's dive into the to that whole subject now.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners, viewers, your first experience with something that could be said to be not part of this earth, extraterrestrial, whatever words we want to use?
Um, that's like a long story, but I'll start. I think I was like 2 or 3 years old. I would see some faces at the window. I mean, maybe children see that and they make things up or something, but they didn't look human. And I always wanted to be an astronaut. I love Star Trek. And going back to it being a child, like 2 or 3, I could not fall asleep. I was very hyperactive. They would have given me drugs if they did that to children back then. But
Well, with all the Mercury Uranus energy, my God, yes, of course.
right, my mind was very active. I was very inquisitive. I didn't talk that much because there was so much to see. I didn't feel like I needed to. I wanted to take it all in, but I couldn't fall asleep. And sort of discovered at like 3 years old, my own way to fall asleep was just closing my eyes and focusing on what I was seeing there. Was sort of like activated the third eye. I felt, and
Mm,
later on I realized that. So closing my eyes and focusing as if I was going through the void. Kind of, I started to see a white light as like a 3-year-old,
wow.
right in the third eye. I mean, I didn't know what that was, but so there was an activation of some level of consciousness, because then I always felt like I was the observer of reality. Maybe that's a little disassociation instead of being in reality. But it's like growing up and feeling a little different than everyone else. Everyone liked team sports. I'd like individual sports, swimming and track and stuff like that. I still don't understand why people cheer because their baseball team wins. I mean, no offense to people who like their baseball team or soccer team or football team, but it it just doesn't move me in the same way. It's like if you insult people's football team, they get offended because they are so identified with that their associations that
Very
you
true.
it's okay if people want to do that, but I don't understand that level of human reality.
Well, one thing about Aquarian is the whole group consciousness is a real challenge for Aquarius because on the one hand they'd like to be somewhere where they fit in, but they usually don't feel any group they truly 100% fit in, and so
Right.
they're
It's
always
like
kind of
it's like
yeah.
Groucho Marx said, "I don't wanna be a part of any club that have me as a member," you know?
That's right. That's right. I remember Groucho said that.
But,
Yes.
it's right, that is a kinda duality of Aquarian there. I mean, it's a collective, kind of connection we have to the group, but we're very much individuals and on our own.
Exactly.
So, it's a kind of irreconcilable paradox, I think, of the Aquarian condition. I mean
Tell me now. Tell me about the first connections you had with extraterrestrials.
right.
What it was like.
Well, what was that like?
Yeah.
Well, did you read my book? And
Yes. Yes.
in my chapter, I always was interested in space. I wrote a poem when I was like 7 about stars, and I always thought there was something out there, but I didn't have. I mean, of course, the faces at the window, but I didn't have a direct experience until I was driving cross country with my girlfriend, and we were tired from driving, long distances. We pulled off the road,
How old were you?
and what?
How old were you at that time?
I would say early 30s, probably.
Okay.
And we just passed out. We just went to sleep, and we woke up the next morning in the same position that we went to bed in. And we went to fell asleep, and who even remembers something like that, right? I mean, I don't remember but that morning was like we had been frozen, suspended in animation, and then the following day, actually, once I got back to someone noticed a mark on the back of my leg, a 4-prong puncture mark, and they said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, that must be like a spider bite," or I don't remember anything like that, but I just so happened to meet around that same time people that were working with Bud Hopkins. You know who Bud Hopkins was?
Well, of course, yes.
He had the Intruder Foundation group in New York, and I met someone who was working with him. I said, "What do you think this could be?" And she goes, "Oh, that's an abduction mark." I said, "Really?" It kind of freaked me out because I didn't remember it, but it also, what they say in the business, sucked me down the rabbit hole. You know, it ignited like a curiosity and a passion. And, I have hundreds of books on UFOs, ETs, abductions. I sought out the biggest names in the field. I got to know John Mack and Whitley
Me too.
Strieber. I'm still in
Yes.
touch with, and Bud Hopkins, of course, became not quite a friend, but he was someone I could call up and say hello, and so it just became an obsession with me. And
Did your girlfriend have Mark on her too, or
yes,
no?
well, I said to her, I have this mark, and I mean, she was in Michigan at the time, and I was in New York, and I said, "You remember that night?" And she goes, "Yeah, the night we were felt frozen or really suspended." I said, "Do you remember anything?" I said, "I have this mark on the back of my leg," and I wasn't ready to be regressed. It wasn't until many years later that I was actually hypnotized to go back to that place. So she was regressed right away, and she said, "Yeah, I see something where we're connected. There's some, like, I don't know what it was, energetic connection between her ankle and my knee." Don't really know what was going on there, but um, she did remember that. And now, years later, I called her because I put her in the book, and I said, "You remember remember that night we were driving cross country?" And she goes, "Yeah, the night we were frozen." This is 30 years later she's saying this. And so she really did remember that. And I don't know, it was a point of activation. It was a point where I was regressed, and I did see these beings that weren't as scary as I thought they would be. I have to say,
What were they like?
they if you ever look at Kamara Jones's artwork, do you know who she is? Art Soldier 77. She draws these big-headed aliens that just have eyes, there's no mouth and no nose. They're just basically, etheric type, but they were more than etheric. There's a physicality to them. So these beings, that was what I saw in the regression. A little more substantial than etheric, but they weren't that solid. And the thing that people are freaked out in abductions, if you want to call it that, or contact in those kind of contacts, is not that these beings are there. It's just that they're not supposed to be there in the reality that we think the world is.
Yes.
And that's actually, I'm writing about that in my second book, about what John Mack called ontological shock. The shock is the world is not what we were told, and it's not
Yes.
time space continuum. There's
Yes.
something else, but because we're so programmed and brainwashed, we think the
Exactly.
world is this thing that we fit into a box, and that's a
Exactly.
wall. And when we find out that it's not, and you know what, our self identity is very caught up with the reality that we think the world is. So,
That's right.
we think we're this body, and we're not. We're the body, but we're much more than the body. So when you are suddenly rudely awakened to the fact that the world is not what we've been told, that's the trauma. That is not the ETs. It's just that, because the other part is that there's a shift in consciousness when you meet these beings.
Let's talk about the abduction stuff too, because
Yeah.
I interviewed John. I was one of his last people to interview him before he died.
John Mack?
Yeah, I had a radio
Oh.
show back in Santa Fe that was on um, free radio. You know,
Oh.
um,
What year was that? I was living in Santa Fe in the 90s, actually.
well, this was 2002 when I interviewed him. I had the show from 2000 through 2002
Oh.
for like about 3 years, but that's what he talked about on the show. Of course, was the abductions, because his book then was Passport to the Cosmos. Back then, it
Right.
was before he wrote the one Abduction later.
Right.
So the reason I want to talk about abduction is because, a lot of what he learned from the people he interviewed, and you know this too, I'm sure, was that, there's a reason for the abductions, and they wanted to get people uh, to know that we were destroying ourselves through the climate and through nuclear weapons. And
Yeah.
their reason for wanting us to be involved was to educate us on this. At least that's what I got from the interview
Well,
back
that's
then.
one of the things they
Yeah.
want. I think they also wanted our genetics. Or they do want our genetics. I mean, I think I at some point
Yes.
had donated sperm to the hybrids that were still being made. Some people say, I don't know. I don't hear about abductions as much as I did in the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
And starting in the 60s, of course, with Betty and Barney Hill, they were the first
Hmm.
real 61. Um, but they do want to create, I think, hybrid beings, the grays. They reach the end of their evolutionary cycle as breedable. They became, this is my theory, and a little bit of what John and other people, and Linda Moulton House says this a little bit. They became pure intellect. They disconnected from their physical body and became pure mind, and they lost their ability to procreate, but also to see the mystery of creation and to feel and to be emotional. So what they want from our genetics is to, because the genetics also contain the emotionality of the human being. When they do like liver or heart transplant or lung transplants, the recipient takes on some of the emotions of the donor. So there's emotionality in our DNA, which is also why we tend to behave like our parents, because it's passed down, until
Right.
until you can change your until you epigenetically change your DNA, we're for the sins of our fathers are forced upon us, if you want to put it that
Yeah,
way.
that's why religion tells us that we have like original sin. I always hate that phrase, original sin, but from that context, I understand it.
Well, it's not original. I mean, yeah, somewhere it originated, but I think we can overcome the programming in the DNA as we become more aware of our patterns. And there is DNA reprogramming and all that. But for the ETs, they wanted our genetics. And in exchange, they were helping us to save the planet. They were saying, look, you're destroying probably one of the more beautiful planets in the galaxy, in the cosmos. And so part of what you said, I think, is true. The other part is it was an exchange.
Yeah,
And
it makes sense. Yes.
I think that, and not many other people don't agree with that. I tend to think they did want something from us, and they were able to give us something, and they're still working on creating the hybrid race, which is a combination of advanced intellect and emotional capacities, you know?
I want to come back to this, but
Yeah,
to jump off to this to something
sure.
else too. And I mean, don't you believe that many of us really are, even without having those experiments? We're partly from the stars, and we're partly from the Earth. You know, I,
Yes.
I know you've also read Sitchin, Zechariah Sitchin,
Yes.
as I, and of
Yes.
course we know what he says about Nibiru and the people coming down and seeing Neanderthals or something not very advanced here on the Earth, and then wanting to mate with us, to do a hybrid experiment with us, to create something that was going to be a combination of them and what was here on the Earth.
Yeah, I think that was the first level of hybrid upgrades from the evolving primates to Cro-Magnon, which we are, with the more developed brain, more cognitive abilities, the ability for language. I mean, no other species, well, maybe dolphins have a language, dolphins and whales. And I don't think they're from this planet either, because there is nothing in the fossil record that shows mammals going back into the sea and developing, swimming
Mm,
abilities. They say that's
yeah.
where dolphins and whales came from. But if you check, there are no species that are in between land mammals and sea mammals.
Oh, that's
You
true.
cannot find it.
That's
So
true.
there's a Darwinian fabrication. And I think
Hmm.
Darwin, of course, the evolution does exist, but I do think there's ET intent that has brought species here, like elephants. There's nothing that's close to an elephant. On some planet, there may be an evolutionary process, and you're right. I mean, there was an intentional upgrade to the evolving primates to make us who we are today, and so we're actually part alien already. And then
Yes.
the Greys were upgrading their hybrid race even more and to create an offspring they want. Some people say they're here to take over the planet. I don't think so. I think if you listen to Bashar, they are not coming here. The hybrids that are been created from the genetic manipulation of humans and Greys. I think they've gone to another place to create their own civilization. So
That's interesting. But let me just explore a little more on the abduction, because there's a lot of people that are concerned, like even if your intention, like the end justifies the means kind of a thing. Like, okay, well, great, they want to help the planet, but is it really right to abduct somebody, take them out of their homes and bring them into a ship and
well,
change them through this hybrid
that's the big
process?
argument that's going on now, actually, with a lot of abductees saying, and Bashar would say, you made an agreement on some level. And I just interviewed Marina Seren and said, wait a minute, you can make an agreement, but I've changed my agreement. I don't want to be abducted. You have to ask. It's like the cosmic Me Too, you know? You have
Yes,
to
exactly.
you have to
Exactly.
ask, like, oh, you sure you want this? And like,
Yes.
I think there was some liberties taken and some manipulation that results in very traumatic effects on human beings that I don't think, because they don't know how to feel, can actually relate to. I think that's part of the problem, is that a lot of people, I mean, some have great experiences and then they awaken, and other people become alcoholics, drug addicts, because
That's
the trauma of your world, the ontological shock of your world not being what it is when you meet these beings, creates a lot of havoc. And
this is this is important even outside that world. Like, for instance, a man is abusive to his daughter, right? Rapes her, beats her. She turns out to be one of the greatest therapists on the planet. And so people say, well, that was okay because that was part of her process. There was an agreement on a deep level that she would become this contributor to our culture, and she
right.
had to go through that. So I mean, that subject is important on all sorts of levels of consciousness.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I think that's spiritual bypassing. Say, oh yeah, awful things happen, and with you,
Yeah.
and I think, it's also the other end. We don't want to be victims of anything, so people say, okay, but that's still a spiritual question up for grabs,
Yes,
in a sense.
I
And
agree.
not that we're grabbing anything, but it's hard, yeah, because I think a lot of people pass that off as spiritual bypass. Oh, you're meant to have, so you could do anything to anyone and say, oh, you agreed, and it's like
Exactly.
that is
Exactly.
abuse. So
Yes.
I think the spiritual community still is coming to terms with that. Of course, some people have been through awful things, say, yes, it was the best thing that happened to me. Other people say, no, they've never recovered. So I don't know. I don't I think it's best to be nice to people all the time, to have nice bedside manners. If you're going to take people's DNA, ask them first. you know, it's
I agree.
it's like
Yes.
we have to be more responsible on all ends and not say, "Oh yeah, that was meant to be." I think that is a really not, I would say, respectful way out of the situation.
Yes.
And
Yes.
on the other person's ends, maybe they Maybe they did. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one.
It's a good question. I mean, even I, and maybe you too. I mean, I can go back to my childhood. I wasn't treated perfectly, but it did help me to become who I am. So even though you can't make an excuse for somebody that does that, they're still perpetrator, and you were victimized. Nevertheless,
Well,
from a bigger picture, who knows what the script is?
well, if you look at Ray Hernandez's book, do you know Ray Hernandez?
No, tell me.
He wrote the book Beyond UFOs, and he did a big survey of people who were abducted in contact. And in that survey, he asked the abductees, um, do you feel your experience benefited you? First, he said, was it a pleasant experience? So like 50% said no. And then 90% said, yes, the experience benefited me in some way. So,
Mm,
I mean, I know it was still traumatic for me, but if I didn't have my, let's call it abduction experience, I definitely feel I would not be as expanded as Aquarian, let's say,
yeah,
as as out there. So, I mean, it wasn't awful, my thing. It was just, I mean, there's still pieces I haven't remembered, but for some people it's a lot worse than other people. But for me, maybe it was mild, the abduction trauma, because it is trauma. If your
that's
doors are locked, the lights are off, you're in bed by yourself, and then you're sleeping, and suddenly someone is standing at the foot of your bed, that's shocking. That is traumatic, no matter if you
yes,
made an agreement lifetimes ago. So
that's right.
it's um,
That's right.
it's unnerving, and I don't know. It definitely distorts your reality in ways that maybe that's good because you're suddenly, out of the mainstream reality that you thought everything was just the way you thought it was. I mean,
Yes,
actually, John Mack says this in some of his early lectures. He said it's a rude awakening, but that's what humanity needs. He says,
that's for
he
sure.
says, what's that?
Well, no, finish what you're saying. I have
Oh,
another
I just
question.
was going to quote John Mack, who
Yeah.
says UFOs and ETs are like an outreach program from the cosmos for the consciously impaired, which is us. So,
Yes, that's
what were
true.
you going to say?
Oh, so now as we take a look at the world, and you probably heard me earlier speaking about the big shift in ages,
Hmm.
and tell me what you believe ET experience is going to be like, or how much they're going to be involved in helping us to further transform consciousness and move into a new age. What's your opinion on all that?
Well, because Uranus does rule Aquarius, and Uranus is definitely a planet that goes beyond the ordinary, I think ETs are very much a part of the Aquarian age. The presence of these other beings and these other consciousnesses um, is a function of the transformation of humanity.
Mm,
So these ETs, as I see it, they vibrate at a different frequency. And you might like this thing that sort of came to me in my own explorations of why ETs are different. And I figured they're different because their sun calibrates their consciousness at a different frequency, you know? So there's a calibration from your solar sun, no matter what solar system you're in, that that sets a kind of metrics to your frequency awareness. That's why we can look at animals and say, yeah, we can tune into dogs and cats and horses and, even wild animals. There's something we connect with. But ETs, when they show up in your room and you interface with them, they will sweep your consciousness out of your awareness field, meaning you have to be so lucid to maintain a sense of self and be in that frequency of interface because they are not of this world. They're in the world, but they're not of the world. And unless we're super lucid in altered states, I don't mean drugs, but I mean dream states, um, it's hard to stay conscious because their field is so much more expansive and at a different frequency. It's like trying to get Wi-Fi on your AM radio. It's like it just doesn't. So we have the capacity of our brains to shift frequencies, but because we are so programmed to think in a very linear way, which is why remote viewing opens that thing up because it's not linear. Um, until we can modulate the frequencies of our I would call it this neurometrics is one way to say it, then we really can interface with these beings on their frequency. But we have that capability. We just have to be able to. And actually, Daryl Anka says this in the book. Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar, said he wanted to meet Bashar one day, and he asked to meet him, and Bashar shows up in this dream state. And as he gets closer to Bashar, all his sense of self-identity is just being pulled out of him, and he freaks out. Even though he's been channeling him for 30 years, he freaks out because he can't be in that field. And that's the practice. And that's why they don't show up on the White House lawn. That's why
Do you think they will coming up?
I
Are
think
things get so
we
bad, you
need
think
to
they'll show up on a
shift. I
mass
think the
basis?
Aquarian age is the shift in neurofrequencies that
Yeah,
allow us to interface with these beings on a much more even playing field. That's the importance of the Aquarian age, one of the importance. Does that make sense to you?
makes total sense. Do you feel they're going to make a grand appearance as we go through some of this transition from one age to the next, especially when it gets
Uh,
to be more crisis? Do you think they're going to appear on a mass basis?
I think for those people who have shifted frequencies, I think they have appeared on a mass basis. The Phoenix Lights of 1997, the whole
Yes.
city of Phoenix
Mhm.
appeared. So that's their sort of cat and mouse game. They appear, they disappear. People say, what was that? And then they appear again. Over Mexico, there was a huge armada of these lights, and people say, what was that? And then, there's been another wave with the release of the documents to the Pentagon of the Nimitz and the 2004 and the 2015. So there are these flaps, they call it in UFO lingo. And there's always a series of flaps that seem to happen sort of around the fourth year of the decade,
Oh,
um, 54, 64, 74, 84, 90, around that. And not always, I mean, they're appearing more and more anyway, but I
so
think
2024.
2024
Yeah.
is something I got that might be, I don't think they're going to appear to like the world, but it's already happening. My book became very popular because the government came out with their assessment of UFOs and there were no answers in there. They labeled 143 out of 144 military cases as other. There were 5 groups they put unidentified flying objects into: airborne clutter, possible high-tech technology, satellites, meteorology phenomena, or the 5th category that all of them fell into was other. That's all they could say about these objects in the sky. Is that, and you could look up the June 25th, 2021 preliminary assessment for UAPs and look at page, I think 5. It says, yes, we're calling them other. I mean, we were more aware in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even J. Allen Hynek's work. They started to narrow down what these close encounters were, but we've somehow regressed. I mean, it's one step forward and one step back. Yeah, there's more government acknowledgement, but there's also another level of denial. So I don't know what the big deal is to say, guess what, Earth, we have company, but maybe
It's
it's
part of
like what your
it's got to
mother
be part
told
of the
you.
program. Got to be part of the keep them programmed and controlled. We
It's
don't
part
want
of the
them to change their
control.
consciousness.
I was just meeting with Christopher Mellon, who was Assistant Deputy of Defense for Clinton and Bush for like 8 years or something, and he's all on our side. He says heads have to roll if we want to get the truth from
Oh, that's great.
deep inside government. They're not telling presidents, and the president. Not that that really means anything, but if we had a president, if we had a decent president, and I'm not going there, but
But I know
I'm
what
not
you
saying
mean.
I
Yeah.
don't think we've had any who
No,
would demand the truth, saying, "Look, this is the Constitution. This is the constitutional right of the." And I think Eisenhower was probably one who did that, and I think they killed Kennedy because he was going to do it. Eisenhower, like I think you said, beware of the military
military.
industrial.
That was Eisenhower. That's right.
You said that in your introduction there,
Yes.
and Eisenhower knew that there was stuff he was not being said. And if the Constitution, and maybe it's not, the rule of law in the land, and the president is the executive, I mean, I know this is very political, and of course, that's not what's really going on because there's people pulling strings behind the scenes that we will never know the names of. But if we could be a little more, let's say, liberal or conservative, whatever you want to call it, and look at the Constitution as the ultimate law of the land, and someone was elected and say, okay, let's get it out there, let's tell the truth, then we could have the truth, you know. But
There's
what's it?
there's there's so much more for us to talk about, Al. I hope will you come back soon
Oh,
on the
yeah,
show?
I'll come back every week if you want, Leo. No, this is a
Oh,
very,
I love Alan. I love you. That would be wonderful.
I,
Because there's so much more in consciousness that we need to touch on. Like for instance, you just started a little bit on psychedelics. There's more and more people are getting involved in psychedelics,
right.
microdoses of things, and how that can help shift. I'd like to have a whole
I
half
just
hour
want to say
discussion
one
on
thing
that alone.
about that. That could only open the window. It won't, psychedelics will not get you through the door. It won't do it for you. It will maybe get you out of your stuck thing, but you have to get there
Exactly.
on your own neurochemistry. Especially, that's what remote viewing did for us, Leo. It opened this window
Right.
of awareness that's always there, and it's in us. It's like, I think, yes, you can use plant medicine if you need medicine, but if you don't need medicine, stop taking medicine. I know that it may offend some of your psychedelic viewers,
That's
but
okay.
I mean, I think we have the capacity that, if we do psychedelics, which is great or not, we miss the inner capacities we have to transform that our consciousness, and that is something we
Well,
need to value more.
I agree. If you use the psychedelics to break down the walls, and then you continue your consciousness through meditation and other practices, then you're using them to me, you're using them in a
Right,
useful way because people do need the walls broken down. And sometimes that's
right.
very helpful for that.
But if you keep using it to break down the
Right.
walls and there's no more walls to break down, it
Yes.
becomes a crutch for altered states. I do think the better way is lucid dreaming, meditation, but being aware. There's nothing better than watching yourself fall asleep, if you can, and be aware of the dreamscapes and dropping into other worlds. Because I don't agree with Freud saying it's all recycled, frustrations or wish
Yes.
fulfillment.
I
I
agree.
think we are actually visiting other worlds with our consciousness, and I think consciousness is so non-local and fluid that we need to value those states more, and that's the biggest um, avenue for connecting to ETs, to higher self, to non-local realities, to seeing the future, past. It's our doorway, and so many people put so little attention to that. So
Makes a lot of sense on
Well,
the
we didn't even
dreams.
talk about remote viewing, Leo. We didn't
I
even,
know we didn't even get to that.
is, is this only an hour, the show?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Would you tell people? That's why we have to do it again. Would you tell people some things that you're doing and how to get a hold of you?
Yeah. I'm doing a whole other 8 weeks of remote viewing that Leo did, and you did really well. I'm really happy you were in the class. I really am. But we're,
Thank you.
we're doing it starting October 17th. We're doing another 8 week series with Cinca Caro. Go to lightnet.org, sign up. Also, Leo's doing his astrology and making contact there as well.
Yes,
Great. And I'm also going to be in Sedona in March, Leo. I'll see you in March at the Ascension conference there. I'll
excellent.
be I'll be at the where else will I be? I will be at the Conscious Life Expo in February in LA. I'll be at the Portal to Ascension conference in April, and I'm doing live streams on my YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/new realities. I have thousands of interviews with people like this, and also EETs and beings who remember their
Right.
lifetimes, and
Give that again.
anything
Give that
that's
again. Give that again. That
what
address.
youtube.com/new realities. It is the window into the Aquarian age. Um, I just interviewed Raquel Spring, who's a great Aquarian astrologer. Do you know her work?
I don't. I don't. Raquel
Oh, I'm gonna
Spring.
get you with her together with her. We'll having a whole Aquarian conversation when she's in Sedona, and she's a great
Oh,
astrologer too. So let's do that.
nice.
Let's do an Aquarian roundtable when I get there.
Oh, that
Also,
would be so much fun. I would love that.
actually, on New Year's, I usually do a prediction show with astrologers for the new year. So let's do something around the new year 2023, okay?
That
I'll
sounds
put you
very good. I'd love to participate.
Yeah, so chart a course for 2023 and let us know what you have coming up, what you see coming up. And because isn't 2023 where Pluto does it enter Aquarius
It goes
then?
into Aquarius. Yeah, it goes in and out of Aquarius in 23, and then it stays in Aquarius for about 20 years after that, which is extra
Wow.
long for Pluto to spend in a sign.
Wow.
So
And
that'll do a
Pluto
lot
is
of
the
cleaning out
planet of transformation.
and cleaning out the old. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, good. No, and I'm just mostly contact me through my email, newrealities@earthlink.net. Look for my book, Making Contact, The New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence. It's on Amazon. Also, it's St. Martin's Essentials Publishing. And that's been my main focus, traveling around and talking about my book and what is the essence of ETs. And the next book, I go deeper into the abduction experience, not as well, some of trauma, but how it is a transformation and awakening of humanity.
Sounds good, Alan. We'll have you back soon, as long as whenever you're coming, want to come back. I'm going to ask you to come back a whole bunch of times.
Let's do it next month in November.
Sounds good. How about the first week in November?
I'm there.
Okay, good. Alan will be back. Good seeing you, Alan. Love you, buddy. Take care of
Leo,
yourself.
thanks so much. I appreciate your peaceful, kind ways. So we will meet soon.
Sounds good, Alan. Take care of yourself,
Thanks.
buddy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And to finish up our show, I'm going to bring on Deborah Knighton Tallarico so she can just say goodbye to everybody. And there she is. Hi, Deborah.
Hey there. So I enjoyed hearing Alan speak, and of course, all that you spoke about first. And I just wanted to say, I think I agree with Alan about the use of plant medicines. I think they need to be used in a really sacred way, and like you said, they can open us up to spiritual experiences. But ultimately, once we have those experiences and we open our consciousness, we can do that without the plant medicines. So I really appreciated what he said about that, and of course other things too. I'm looking forward to hearing more about his talk on consciousness, because that's what's so important right now, the shift in consciousness on our planet.
That's right.
So yeah,
To us, to the three of us, nothing more important.
right, exactly. Yeah. So powerful
Again,
week ahead, I guess, with Pluto changing directions and everything. So and Mercury going direct
Mercury changing directions this weekend. Pluto will be changing directions on the 8th.
on the 8th, which is soon, this next
Yeah,
week.
that's next weekend at the
Yes.
full moon.
I think we're at the hour mark. So
Yeah, we'll be
tell
back in 2
people how they
weeks.
can get a hold of you, honey.
Oh, go up to my website, leoknightentallarico.com, or write me an email, solus, SOULUS, at AOL.com. And I'll talk next week about the show that I'll be doing also. And Alan told you about the one he's going to be, not show, but class. I'll tell people more about that next time. The next show will be in 2 weeks. Alan will be back in 4 weeks, which I'm really happy about. And everybody, take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you soon. And Perspectives from the Sky says goodbye for now.
And I'll talk to you next time too, everybody.
Yes, you will. Bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Lots of love.